For a moment of meditation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance to the American flag. You will hear 3 taps of the gavel when it is time to stand. Please join me for a moment of meditation now.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Clerk of Council, Mrs. Skank, please call the attendance roll.
Mr. Lawley.
Here.
Mrs. Carter.
Here.
Mr. West.
Here.
Mr. Horn.
Here.
Mayor Slamka.
Here. Do we have a motion to receive and file the special meeting documents?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been properly moved and seconded. We will proceed to vote. Mrs. Skank, please call the roll.
Mrs. Carter.
Yes.
Mr. West.
Yes.
Mr. Horn.
Yes.
Mayor Slamka.
Yes.
Mr. Lawley.
Yes.
The yeses have it, and the motion passes. On the agenda today is the discussion for the fiscal year 2025 budget. So we're here to have that conversation tonight. And just to have, I thought it was a good idea just to be able to have a kind of discussion before the November 5th council meeting to get us all together at one time so we can all hear the answers, ask the questions, and hear everything together. So does anybody want to start with anything particular? We can do that now.
I guess I have a few questions that hopefully we can answer. And after looking through what was given to us at the end of the week, this weekend, I got a few thoughts. And my first thought for the 2025 budget is in regards to the income tax revenue projections. So it just appears to me that we're being very conservative. And I understand that we don't want to get ourselves into a negative financial position by being too liberal on this. However, it's difficult for council to make sound budget policy by not being a bit more precise in our income tax revenue projections. And I base this on our history that you can garner from our financial records. So I guess I have a few questions that and there could be perfectly explanations for it. I understand, but I want to make sure we get that out there so we can answer it. So for example, 2025, your income tax projection for transfer to the general fund is $20.8 million. The original 2025 projection you gave council was a 4.7% increase, but now we're seeing it only at 2.5. So my first question is, what changed? Because that's a significant drop. That's like a $500,000.
Yeah, there was an error in that original number that was given related to a transfer that wasn't accounted for. There was a break in one of our Excel sheets.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then, like I said, tell me if I'm wrong or we're not looking at something. So the 2024 income tax projection for transfer into the general fund was $20.3 million. And as of September 1st, we're at $18.7 million. So we're averaging about $2.3 million per month being transferred in. So if you look at our annual monthly historical data going all the way back into the early 2012, 2013, 2014, it's safe to surmise that we can expect approximately an additional $9.3 million transferred in between September 1st and December 31st. Is that correct?
So this is where kind of the Ouija board comes out for revenue projection.
What?
The Ouija board. So there are 3 components to our income tax revenue, and this is a risk assessment for council.
We use a Ouija board to do budgeting. We've got problems.
So So the three streams of revenue for the income tax fund are withholding tax. So that's income tax withholding from folks that work here in the city, deducted out of their paychecks remitted by their employers. The second tranche is individual filers, and those are folks individually that are filing because they may work elsewhere and they don't withhold, or they're sole proprietors. That also accounts for like S corps, LLCs, those types of pass-through entities. And then the third component is corporate net profit filings. So a company here in town will annually file their corporate profit statements, and they pay taxes on net profits with a 5-year net operating loss look back. What we have seen over the last 3 years is that we have had atypical levels of corporate net profit filing. Can't get you, for privacy reasons, can't get into the details as to the exact mechanisms of why that happened, but we had higher than usual corporate net profit filings by one or more companies that has skewed things past what you would think would be the regular trajectory. So in preparing the budget proposal for your consideration, from a risk assessment standpoint, staff took it as, hey, let's not account for the atypically high last couple years of net corporate profit filing. If it comes, fantastic. That's a great discussion for council somewhere through the fiscal year. But in terms of counting on those dollars and making that a core part of the revenue projection, that's a little risky, at least from staff's assessment, unless, we have, more than a couple years of statistical, data that shows that, hey, man, this is coming each and every year. And so when it comes to corporate net filings, that ebbs and flows, not only because of some of the business and accounting decisions that certain companies in town may make from year to year on how to depreciate certain assets or charge off certain costs, but the state legislature also amended the municipal tax code several years ago that also now allows for up to a 5-year net operating loss look back, or excuse me, carry forward, so that you may have under previous traditional times for this year, you may have a tax liability under corporate net profits. However, if you show a loss for the last 3 years, you can reduce that tax obligation or wipe it out and carry it forward for another 5 years. So trying to be conservative in that, not wanting to count on revenues that just haven't demonstrated themselves long enough that they can be counted on. The amount of percentage or amount of money for corporate net profit filings is the main driver for not adhering to the last couple years' trend.
Okay, so that I fully understand. And that's why we've seen in the 1 year it was 31 million.
Yeah.
Not 24 million. I mean, what I seen accounted for that was maybe $3 or $4 million, not 9 million.
Well, keep in mind too, we're talking, unless I misunderstood the question, you're talking what just goes to the general fund, not also what's collected. 'Cause yeah, that 31 gross, that will also include the paving levy.
Right.
And public safety.
No, the income tax, okay, yes.
Yeah.
Not, okay, but what I'm saying is even you look at the trend and the historical data before that, we are like doing a conservative projection by $3 or $4 million every year.
We have.
I mean, you have to go back to, for example, in 2023, that was the year, the corporate thing you were talking about, where we projected 20 million and got in 31 million. If you look at 2022, not sure what we projected, but we transferred 25 million. In 2021, we transferred 27 million. In 2020, we transferred 20 million, and that was COVID, because you go before that, 2019 was 22 million, 2018 was 21 million. You have to go all the way back to 2017 when we didn't transfer in at least what we're what we're projecting for 2025. So with all the construction and everything we appear and we seem to have going on, and how good our companies seem to be doing, I just see, I think we could figure things out in this budget if we weren't so conservative with our projections. And that's what I'm, because that's what I mean, I get it. Believe me, I was there, you know that, and I believe in the conservatism, but we're, we need to get police officers on the street. And if we have access to at least 2 of that $4 million, we can put another 5 police officers on the streets. We can staff our fire stations to what they need to be staffed at not first emergency first with 1 station like we're into now. We can pay our policemen and our firemen what we need to pay them. We can pay our city employees what we need to pay them. But once again, I understand wanting to be conservative. My point is, we're just being too conservative.
I was wondering that too. Like, it seems like we're being pretty conservative, and I was wondering what the answer might be. I'm glad you asked that question. One of the things I'm concerned about as well is when we're drawing down the rainy day fund, the balance. I know originally we had talked about doing it in a 2-year step, but with projections kind of looking forward, it seems like we'll probably be drawn down, depending on how things go, pretty far even next year, probably to around upper 30s, even though it says like 41 point something % here. So I'm wondering if maybe it might be a good position to be a bit more conservative, but maybe not as much as we are right now. To take a look at that conversation as well.
I think that just kind of touches on at a high level a couple meetings ago when I said, well, hold on a second, like we need to, if we're going to be conservative with our look ahead on, because I know the tax revenues are kind of up and down. There's a trend where we've had a couple businesses close in town the last week or two, couple weeks, which is fine. I mean, if we want to have some conservative outlooks, that's why I brought up, hey, I think it's a good time to take a look at where we are staff-wise, proposed, additional FTEs in the different departments, but make sure that we do it in a way where we can take care of the staff that we currently have, and also take a hard look at getting public safety, continuing to make progress on the public safety end that we've already done this year. So for me personally, my personal take on this would be looking at if we want to have a conservative approach or outlook with what we might take in next year, I think 20.8 million for 2025, it could be reasonable. I mean, you look at some of the years, and I know I would say probably, I would agree with staff and Paul's remarks on 2023 that was an outlier with the 31, really almost 32 million. That's kind of an outlier. So even if we look at it and say it's safe to assume 20.8 or 21 million, I would probably be a bit more conservative on how we increase staff, for example. So I'd be open to adding, I'll just pick on parks, for example, instead of 3, adding 1 role there, instead of the 3. I would like to see if we're going to increase some staff, we put it predominantly or a little bit heavier note towards public safety. What's our authorized strength right now? 82. 82. So, potentially maybe getting that to 85 with this budget. I would say that's where I'd kind of like to stretch a little bit.
I think
I
that's
think
what's,
it's 85 now.
Is it, or excuse me, 87?
That's what's in the budget.
yeah, right now, yeah, you're
Yeah,
correct.
on
What
the
was
proposed
presented to
budget.
you tonight, yeah.
Excuse me, I mean
I
80s.
was thought for 24, that's what
Yeah.
I was answering.
Yes. Well,
mean-
for 24, it went to 84 halfway through the year, correct? 'Cause
In-
we added the deputy chief and the lieutenant halfway through the year, I thought. It was 82, went to 84, right?
We did a bump in
In the mid-year?
May,
So it's May or June?
May or June?
Yeah, because we added the deputy chief and the lieutenant, so it should have bumped to 84. But now, if you look at our records, it'll say 80 or 81 because we added it mid-year.
Chief, if you remember, feel free to yell at us.
Or you can come to the podium. Or do we have that microphone? Could we give that to Chief, please? Unless you want to come to the podium.
Going to make Amy work. It's a work session.
Thank you, Chief Nelson.
Afternoon or evening. From my understanding that the amount for 2024 was 82. We were at 80, and then the
It
additional,
was 82.
82.
the additional 2 spots for the lieutenant and deputy chief.
Okay.
The 82 for 2024. Okay.
Thanks, Chief. I wanted to mention, go ahead, thank you. I wanted to mention, we did have a plan that was started in '23. Was that, I'm not looking at you because you were part of it, for 10 more, I believe, uniform patrol.
We were.
In 5
we were
years.
at 80 back in around 2022. We determined that we need to set a goal to try to get to at least 90 officers by 2026.
So the
It
goal,
wasn't anything we put in writing. It was a inter-staff discussion, talks about where we think we need to be.
so the first.
That was a conservative estimate.
Got you. That's the number I've been working on in my head just all this time. So 2023 was the first year of 2.
Yeah, I think
You
it
knew?
was 2022.
So if we did 2 this year, we do 2 next year, 2 the following year, till the following year, then we'll have that goal of 10, correct, added, 2 for 5 years.
Well,
Because the reason I bring it up is because we all agree that we want more uniformed patrol officers. We all do, and we kind of have to do it in a balanced way that is sustainable. So that's kind of the conversation I want to look at. We looked at 2 for 5 every 5 year, or sorry, 2 for a year for 5 years to get us to that 10 more, and to just have that conversation of what is fiscally appropriate. Also looking at salaries and wages for next year as well, what our balance can actually take moving forward.
officers retiring because they've got their time in.
Attrition, that's what he's talking about. Yeah, thank you.
Right now, we're a young department, so we don't have too many people we see in the foreseeable future that are looking to retire. There's 1 or 2, but nothing significant like we had like a few years ago where we lost over 300 years worth of experience in retirements.
You see where I'm getting? It's like we can keep adding numbers, but people are going to retire when they want to put their papers in, so we have to continue that and then bringing more young people in. So that's just my question.
So within the next 5 to 7 years, we'll see that retirement group again. There's a group of officers such as the officers like Holly Owens and Denny Jordan who just started the dropper in their 25th year, which is the year you can look to retire or go into the drop program. So within the next 5 to 7 years, you may see that the average number of years people stay in a drop program, which is the deferred retirement option program, is about 5 years.
Okay.
So the next 5 years, you can see a huge drop.
Okay, well, that's why I asked the question, because if you were to say, hey, Paul, in 26, we're losing 5 officers because they've got their 25 in, because a lot of them I went to high school with, and they've already retired, but there's a few that are still there in your detective division that might get close.
That being said, we'd still have the space available to hire into. So we'd still have the authorized level of 84 or 85 potentially for next year and going up from there, correct? Yeah, the space would still be there to open up.
so if this budget here takes us to 85, that means by 2026, we're going to be 5 short.
Did we start in 2023 too?
Well, we said in 2022, we said we need to set a goal to be to 90 officers by 2026. You never said 2 a year, 3 a
Oh,
year, 4 a year.
I had remembered that when you had talked before, it was over 5 years, 2 each year to equal 10. So that's where I was coming from. Oh, gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. If we could, I know, if we could move to the health department conversation, because we do have our health commissioner here, and she does have to leave at, I believe, by 6:30. So she had asked if maybe she could be part of that conversation. So, Mr. Cahall, looking at the conversation around the health department, how are we looking for fiscal year 2025?
So for 25, let me get to it here real quick. I get my hymnal here. Okay. So where we're at is that we are projecting right now in this budget, or at least for budget purposes, we were projecting about a $400,000 carryover. God, I'm having to wear glasses these days. It's going to be a little less, but in front of you is what we believe in our financial plan is going to keep things solvent in the health fund. So it's going to be a combination of a general fund transfer, or actually I should say an income tax fund transfer, as is typical. And then, as we discussed, we either have an option of taking further money out of the income tax fund, which would reduce the general fund transfer accordingly, or we have in front of you a proposal to appropriate a portion of the One Ohio Opioid Settlement Fund to help supplement the health department's revenue needs.
What was that portion?
Right now, it's going to be $318,000 and change. Excuse me, that's not, because we do have a little bit here. That's actually a combination of a few things. There is a little bit of police envisioned in that as well. So it's probably closer to, what, about 2? Yeah, it's actually closer to 200 for health is how we have it split out internally. I'm sorry.
200 coming out of
Yes.
the One Ohio?
Yes, yes, sir. The other monies that are shown in that packet out of the One Ohio would be for some police expenses as well, related to, obviously, the opioid issue here in town.
Do you have an idea of about how much of that 200,000 or how much of the health department actually finances the health department dealing with opioid overdose issues?
So actually, yes, and I think probably Jackie remembers that number a lot better than I do this evening. We actually asked her and her staff to kind of quantify, because we have to have something that's attributable for the amount of risk reduction work that they do, or whatnot. So we have a little bit of a proration sheet, and I'm sure Jackie's got the number pretty close, but it was right around that $200,000 mark, I think.
Yeah, it was. That opioid settlement, within my understanding, was we're getting money reimbursed from pharmaceuticals, right? From the damage that was done during that crisis in 2014 to 2016. During that time, we had a large HIV outbreak. We had a large hepatitis A outbreak. We had Hep C, because people were using needles, and it was a lot of that kind of thing going on. So when that settlement came back, it was courts involved in that, it was police because of all of the drug activity, it was EMS because of all of the runs, and it was health and all of the harm reduction that we were doing and following up on all of this infectious disease. We were working with Hamilton County and Montgomery County, and it was just a lot going on. And so we do a lot of vaccinations. We were down in the jails vaccinating police officers with all Hep B, all of those kind of things, as well as all of our residents that was in that high-risk activity. Hep A, we were doing a lot of that activity. We were doing wound care, needle exchange. We were doing Narcan during that time because there was a lot of overdose deaths. And so we were doing a lot of that activity then, and that's why we were awarded some compensation for that. And it's my understanding, since we've received the money, it may have been 2 or 3 allotments. The health department hasn't received any of the money to get that in there. And I'll say this out loud, I'm glad I'm on tape. my budget is such, we're public services, right? And so when we try to raise any kind of revenue or do something, it's on the backs of our businesses and our residents. So we don't do that. And so we usually just want a budget that we can work stably in our department and make it work. So when we say, how much money do you need? I just need a budget that makes my staff be able to work. And so you can look, and I don't want large amounts of money. I just want a steady amount of budget so that the health department can function. We, I think I have both city staff here to know that we're very frugal, and we do not spend wildly and crazy at all. I mean, my staff gets on me all the time about even Kleenexes when we purchase those kind of things. And so in the past with the opiate money, and it's supposed to be, I'm hearing more opiates money coming down the road, as well as there's still opiate monies at the county level to disperse and anything that's needed related to that. And so if you look at the health department, we do treatment, we do things for families of addicts, we do things for children that are involved with addicts. All of the things where we're following up on people that have overdoses, we are referring them into programming, helping the kids in schools. Handle It Care is a big program that when somebody comes home and their parents are lost to opiate overdoses, and or if they saw them and they've overdosed, we take them, and the school lets, the police and the schools let the officials know, or the schools know, and they handle the children with care, knowing that they're going through trauma because they've been through different things. So it's a lot of programming in the school that the health department is still involved with. We're involved with fatalities, overdose fatalities and suicide fatalities. We work with the coroner all the time as far as those cases. And so it's a lot of activity that goes on that way that are not funded activity that we do.
Okay, so was there then a number that, a dollar amount that you thought that $200,000 we're using from the opioid? So in other words, in the health department, 150,000 go towards us dealing with the opioid?
It was, and we turned that report in to Sam and Nathan, and we
What's the
averaged
number?
out our hours. Do you have a copy of that? Do they have it?
It's in the neighborhood of 200,000 is where it was.
We averaged out the hours that we spent in those activities. And so and that money.
I think, what you said was excellent, because I don't think people understand what all the health department does, and they don't understand that there's part of that, the opioid overdose, that you don't see that the health department did.
Absolutely.
And I'm just as big a champion of the health department as I am public safety, because I think it's important Middletown have a health department. But what we are kind of struggling with is to make sure, if we're going to fund the health department with this opioid money, I want to make sure that it goes, there's a relation between the money we're given from the opioid to what you're doing.
Right.
Not, well, we're going to use that money to pay the person who does birth certificates, for example.
No.
I'm not saying that that's it. That's I think a large part of my concern. And then if we can't, then I'm going back to my first thoughts about, okay, if we're being too conservative with our projection, then maybe there's amount of that we add to cover that. And then the last part is, do we know what caused this to be $300,000 short, and how are we going to correct that? Otherwise, we're going to have the same problem in 2026.
And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. I want to talk about 2025, and then we could have another conversation about going forward. And I think, did we want to talk about that tonight? Is that allowable to talk a little bit about what caused the problem?
Well, we're trying to make a
Yeah.
budget decision.
All right, let's do it.
And in the past, and Carlos.
Could you speak into the microphone a little bit more?
Yes, I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
In the past, and Carla can help me with this, with budgets, health departments usually are subsidized by the state, and when you have a city health department, is subsidized by the city. So over the years, it has been subsidized to different amounts. And during one city manager, she wanted possibly for us to maybe merge. And it was like, if you can stay around 115, then you can stay. Well, as you know, your staffing is the highest cost. And so it was getting really ugly at that time with budgets. And we went down to 3 employees. 3 employees was Vital Stats, which is the largest revenue maker in any health department. And then mandated programs, Carla Ely was our environmental director and our only sanitarian, which is a health inspector. And then it was myself. And we were trying to continue to keep the health department up while we tried to find out what we were gonna do. We also tried to do a levy as well at that time, cities. Most people, I mean, some health departments have it. Butler County and Hamilton City does not have a levy, so it's kind of hard. You have to kind of educate your population. In the meantime, we start getting funding back again. You will see all health departments, probably across the United States, receive a lot of money when they're crisis and emergencies, because they always want to build up that staffing for that reason. And so usually during H1N1, we received a lot of money. And when we have the carryover monies, which means our savings that kind of goes over, it lasts us for several years before we have to start dipping in and wondering about our money. And this time with COVID, we had quite a bit of money. But what happened is when you do the subsidy, and say you guys are gonna subsidize us for $300,000, for instance, if you don't give us $300,000 every year steadily, we constantly keep dipping into our savings. So if you look in your budget book, it was one year that we received 150, one year we received 200, one year we received 0. That makes us go into that carryover that we normally would use it to, go out a little further. We also have probably one of the oldest staffs in your organization. I've been here over 25 years. Carla's been here over 25 years. Then I have 7-year, 8-year staffers. So we're longer on the range as far as what your employees cost too. And then of course, with everything else that goes up, our cost is basically in our personnel. And I mean, it's plain and simple. And we do not have an excessive amount of personnel. I want to inform you guys that the health department has to have a triad, which is the health commissioner, the director of nursing, and the director of environmental. That's 3 of us that has to be, it's in the Ohio Revised Code. And other than that, we have one other inspector that is a full-time health inspector. We have a health inspector in training, and then it's a vital statistics. Then we have administrative assistant, which is bilingual. And then we have a FAB coordinator that kind of helps both of those areas out too. FAB is Public Health Accreditation. And she does that because the state of Ohio mandates all health departments to become accredited, which we are. We received our accreditation right in the smack in the middle of COVID. It was painful in 2022.
I have a couple questions for you, Jackie. So when COVID happened, then the federal government reacted as they should, and they gave everybody funds. But then it's interesting when everything goes back to what they consider normal, then those funds are now gone.
Right.
I call it a duffel bag full of money that the federal government just gives, and you get to keep the empty duffel bag. So I was told that you applied for some grants that didn't happen. Why aren't they giving you the grants? Why would they not give you funds for a health department that you're trying to, because what I see, what the purpose of the health department at city level is, it's almost like you have it's divided into 2 areas. The commercial side is where you have the health inspectors. They go in and they check businesses, restaurants, make sure that people aren't going to get sick and die. That's important. Then we have the citizen side of it, where you're taking care of our citizens, be it just for their health, or actually the health inspector has more power than the building inspector, because you can go in and you can condemn a property for the health of the citizens. So that's very important, and that's why, please understand, I also want this to work, but it's like, okay, they keep printing money, and then they give you money and they say, oh, okay, now you don't need it. So can you walk me through what happened? I understand the COVID part and when the federal government stepped in, but it seems like they've kind of stepped out now on you.
Yes and no. I'm excited about the monies that the federal government, and this is across the United States again, are doing with workforce development and public health. And what they want to do is develop the workforce in public health. Hear me, I mean, I can just talk about public health all night, but public health is a trained staff. So you guys couldn't come in the office and work for us. People always say, I can give you a staff person and you can borrow one of my staff people. No, our nurses have to be bachelor's degree nurses. Our inspectors have to start with a bachelor's in science to become even a health inspector. Even the one that's a sanitarian in training, you have to start with a bachelor's degree. So automatically that makes your salaries higher too. And then you have to get trained up in public health. There are so many laws, as you know, ordinances, everything in public health that you have to know about. Disease investigation, it's just not like you have to know how to treat pertussis, you know, have to treat, you know, just different things. So they are trying to get people in the workforce because COVID took a lot of people out, physically and psychologically. And so they need more people in those fields to funnel into the field. So when they give us that workforce development money, we have to hire a staff in order to get that money, right? And so that money comes in and out. So when you get a grant, and that workforce development grant is $400,000, you have to spend the money to get the money every time. And so we are very cautious. Mr. Lawley knows this, because if you happen to have to lay off somebody, that comes out of your budget too. It comes out of our budget. So we want to make sure our budget can hold the staff that we're putting in it. So we're very careful in doing that. And then we try to contract with people so we may not be able to have that kind of dilemma. Also, they're getting serious about public health now. Indiana, if you guys have a chance to look up at Indiana, how they're funding their public health, they're starting to put the money where their mouth is because they see a lot of things coming down the pike that you're going to use public health for. All the storms down south, it's all public health down there. We're doing tetanus shots. We're doing a lot of things because it's after the police show up, the fire show up, and after it's all over, public health shows up to help make sure that we're not having all these water diseases, et cetera. So they're trying to put more money in that line item as we speak at the state level for public health and give us more subsidy. I think right now we get very little subsidy as other states for public health. And that's what the complaint is, and you guys know this too. When we have soldiers and war or whatever, when you're not using them, then that's the first budgets that you cut. But as soon as you have emergency, you're trying to ramp up for the cause. Shout out to Middletonians. Our community was, and I have a paper I want to give you guys, but our community was so well connected, I want to say, that when we had the COVID emergency, we were able to just stand up and get everything done. And it's because we know the community, and we knew the community. We could call the churches, we could call the schools. I was talking to our superintendent Christmas Eve and saying the governor is going to let the schools come back in March. Let's get the teachers vaccinated. He was able to get all that out on our breaks while schools were closed. So we were the first school in the state of Ohio, Middletown City, to get their staff vaccinated, ready to go back fully vaccinated when the kids came back in. So those are the kind of things that smaller health departments can do with the connection of the community because we know people. And that's easy to do. I mean, you guys, it was a lot easier for me to do because I had that wonderful community that I've been a part of for a long time. And it's just hard to do that because people have to find all the churches, find the relationships, get the trust of people. And you're just starting at zero. And so health departments, I'll stop and let you guys ask questions up. But on this one guy said, there's a fire station, and we need to look this up because I keep repeating this because I think it's pretty cool, but I don't know if it's true or not, so that's a disclaimer. But it's a fire station, they said, at the airport in Minneapolis, and it's fully funded, and it's fully staffed, and it's got everything in it, and it has a full truck in there, and it has never been used. But that's how much they believe that that's the importance of that fire station being at the airport. Public health should be that important, that you have staffing and is strong enough that when something comes up, you're able to move out consistently and professionally and efficiently instead of saying, okay, what are we supposed to do now? So we're doing the plans and we're doing everything that we can. Last but not least, it's wonderful when you have a close community because we have a staff of eight people. My board is probably all of us together, it's probably 7 on the board. Most people on the board are health professionals that I can mobilize as well, and we could get a lot of things done before we start getting other people and professionals in there to help us, and that's the purpose of trying to be, emergency ready or public health ready. Public health is not only your restaurants with your inspections, and we work with the zoning department too, but it's all your tattoos, it's all your pools, bodies of water. It is all the, I'm trying to look at all Carla's environment, septic systems. You guys know about all that, the septics, and we have 2 different kinds. We have a lot of things that we do that if we're not inspecting and not doing it correctly, could cause a lot of disease. And so public health is just, I mean, if you go to the site, it's everything. If you're not doing things behind the scenes, when we do public health well, people don't recognize us. Prevention doesn't pay, if I can tell you that.
Make no mistake, I want,
I know you do, I know you do.
I want the health department to know, and I even talked to you about how Cincinnati was having, they were sponsored big by Kroger, and they had a whole street of health awareness.
Yeah.
My only point is
How do we fund it?
just like when developers come into our city, if the federal government will give them money, if the state will give them money, if the county will give them money, and so will the city, they're going to take it, because why pay for something if you don't have to? So all I want us to do is make sure that you're given the ability to get federal monies, to get state monies, and to get county monies, and also get city monies.
Right.
With those 4 entities, you should have no problem with your 8 folks and grow it, because as the city grows, you're at 55,000 with 8, so I'm sure that's a 0.000 something number percent on how many people you got per person.
Yeah.
But we just, that's the main thing is because if it's $300,000 every year, that's great until we hit a recession. And then it's like, okay, how are we going to make you still whole, make the police department still whole, the fire department still whole, the people that, the departments that are critical to keep a city
Right.
alive. That's important.
I agree.
So that's my only point.
Yeah, I agree with that. And prevention is they're trying to change that paradigm, right? But prevention just doesn't pay. And you know, a healthy individual, you get all of your return. But it's just, child checks, they don't pay. But if you come in there with some kind of disease, they can build an insurance. And so that's the same way in public health.
We can look at that. So what is the number that we're looking at moving forward then that would allow everything to be set? A number that you can work with year to year as far as money is right now?
Right. I would think that if we get our revenue, like we were trying to be realistic with our revenue. I think our revenue averages out, we did the last 3 years of our revenue, and we have about, I think it's like 470,000 if we go over the last 3 years of revenue. And then when we get other dollars in, we will start getting more revenue, because the more businesses you come in, you have more licensing and you get more revenue in that way incrementally. I will be retiring hopefully soon in the future, so when you bring somebody in, they'll be on a lower scale. That's what you would hope happens to your workforce. It's a good thing, because everybody can't stay on this end of the thing. So, so we're projecting all of that in there. So I think realistically, and I'm going to be conservative, because I'm always conservative. I'm such a sucker that way. I would love to say $1 million, but really, I think 350 would be good, because 350, if we're bringing in about 450, that gives us enough to support that staff, and then anything else would be a cake, and we would carry it over. I am convinced that we're going to start getting more federal monies. We're just going to. It's a lot of things that people don't even know that's around, that's going on, that you can get that extra money. So I'm convinced we will. And then we can start doing more. We have more staff, more trained staff, then you can start doing little things that bring in revenue as well.
Yeah, and then also because you work, like when we talk about like a concierge service for our businesses as well, and the health department is part of that.
Yes.
Giving that service to the businesses we have here, but also businesses that are looking to come here.
Right.
You can work with the police, you can work with fire. I always see the health department, like when we think about cities, we look at the 3 reasons why we're here. It's public safety, public health, and public well-being. So it's like the trifecta. So health definitely has to be part of this conversation, and a big part of it. So it sounds like with the $200 in the opioid settlement, that's going to take care of fiscal year 2025. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what we're projecting.
Okay. So that sounds like that would work
I
out?
have one question about that opioid money, and it's in regards to, not the health department, Nathan, but the,
sir.
and I don't know if this is for you or for Earl. Are we funding, what do they call it now, the QRT team out of there? And if so, are we still going to fund them in 2025 out of the One Ohio? Is there still?
Yeah, we have that option of what's being proposed to be appropriated, because I think also the police department, we're also looking at maybe a couple of equipment purchases related to some of our prevention efforts as well. So yeah, we have that flexibility.
So it sounds like we're good for fiscal year 2025. Any other comments about that? And then we can look ahead, we can have that conversation for the following years.
Is Exactly. And then out of the water fund or public works, we have received monies from them. That is a ideal spot if you need to bring money in, because usually they do have revenue, and we work with them with septics. We find septics all the time where people have not been put on our water. And then now we get revenue because the water is put on there, all the septic with the water table, et cetera. It's a really good fit. And as we go out, even with the lead, the lead issues that are coming down the pike, health departments are involved in that too. So that is a, what do you call it, a permittable place if you needed to, draw from. And I'm gonna leave you guys this, I'll leave this with Amy. It just talks a little bit about public health, and I would love to talk more anytime you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Phillips-Carter, our Health Commissioner. All right, does anybody want to go next? I have questions too, just random things as well. All right, let me find them, too many papers. Okay. Just talking quickly about the insurance for the city, I wanted to just say again that it is excellent work, that the insurance for the city employees is just going up 3.5%. That's pretty wonderful. Let's see here. I did want to touch base on, well, let me see here. Let me find where I want to start. So in the general fund, page 75, if you guys want to go there. I mean, it's also explained elsewhere, but I'm just looking at the money itself. We talk about transfers out, and we look at the transfer to the downtown fund. I was just curious, I don't know, I know it says a little bit in the explanations what the downtown fund is for. But can you talk a little bit more about what that means? What projects we're doing with the downtown fund money, $175,000?
Yeah, and hold on here, I gotta find my place here.
I believe it's in, the money itself, the fund itself, page 75 of the general fund.
Yeah, hold on here. My apologies, Mayor.
It's a lot.
It is. It's always the last place you look, too.
Wasn't that for like lights and beautification and like
It's gotta be special.
repairs and stuff? City-
It's for the transfer out, page 75. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Wi-Fi, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, it goes towards kind of relatable or related expenses, obviously for downtown improvements. That's where we pay. I'm trying to remember what all we pay out of there. Yeah, there's a little bit of debt service that's paid out of there from way back in the day on debt the city incurred downtown.
Do you know what that was from?
Whew, that obviously predates my tenure. I'd have to look. I believe that is related. We had some expenses related to, didn't we have something related to the parking? Was there a parking garage or something?
Parking,
Yeah, and part of the,
but I thought we acquired some buildings too,
we did.
some stuff.
Yeah, there's just some miscellaneous debt associated with that fund. My apologies for not knowing it chapter and verse at the moment, but
That's okay.
yeah, it's,
That's okay. I was curious.
I can get you that.
Because it's 175,000, 2023, 2024, 2025. So I was curious what that's used for.
Yeah, it's typically, most of it is my understanding, if I remember correctly, most of it's debt service.
Okay, most of it's debt
chunk of
service. Okay. Looking at finance, page 34 of the general fund. So I was just curious, I'm just curious. I'd like to understand what I'm looking at and make the math. So we have, are you there, page 34?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we have our two employees, two staff. 2024 is 196,000, and it went up to 236,000. Just curious, why that happened, how it happened.
We had, obviously, we've hired a new position. That was at a different pay scale. Also, this takes into account the COLA for next year's proposal. So that's really basically accounts for the difference.
Wait, there was a new position, because it said,
Well, no, we filled, so the budget manager position was empty for part of 2024.
in 23?
No, just 24, and was filled.
Oh, I see what you're saying, okay.
was
It was,
filled.
it was
But it was
there.
budgeted for.
It was
Right.
budgeted for, that
This
is
is a
correct.
20% increase
Yes,
for two positions, so 10% of that would be for the COLA.
that is correct, yeah.
Okay, so then the rest would be
Either step increase,
step
yeah.
increases.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. I saw the 40,000, I was like, what is, wait, how'd that, okay. Let's see here.
I'm curious about the non-departmental expenditures by division,
You know what page that is? Just
72.
72 of general fund.
Yes.
What is that?
So in the general fund, there are some just, I'll say, general government, general governance type of things that maybe aren't attributable to one particular department or division in the general fund or the other. So for instance, paying the electric bill, we just kind of pay it out of the 9/11 series of accounts, or one in particular, actually, obviously. Because everyone, uses electricity here in the building or elsewhere, but we just pay that out of just one centralized line item. The same way with some of our technology needs, or, indigent burials, or, cost of the annual fireworks, or those things. So these are expenses that are usually attributable, have an attributable benefit to more than just one general fund entity, or they have a citywide utilization or benefit.
So the burials, isn't that through the health department?
It is something that the health department handles.
Right.
We have funded that out of the general fund traditionally, and not had it as an expense for the health department. Now, it's we can move the dollar from one pocket to the next in the pants, and that if we were to charge burials for the health department out of their budget, we'd have a little bit larger subsidy payment. So it's
Where it was always put for years for some reason.
yeah,
For no better explanation.
yeah.
The one that I'm curious about there, the Butler County Auditor collection fees, they doubled our cost,
What page is that? I'm sorry.
72. We went from 65,000 to 135,000. They more than doubled our.
So that is based on a couple things. It's based on the percent, or it's a percentage of what they collect on your behalf, along with if you have any special assessments that they're collecting. So there's those fees, and that is what we believe is a pretty fair number. You'll see it dropped in '24. That was related to a drop in collections because council decided to cut the inside millage in half for the year. But that's a number that we firm up with the county auditor, much like what they project for property tax collection.
And then the maintenance of equipment there went up 100,000. Is that the event center?
No, it's just that we have some other stuff here in this building that we're usually stealing from other, not in a bad way, but we're taking from other line items towards the end of the year for certain things, physical plant wise. So we just decided, let's be more realistic.
Let's see here. I don't have the page number, but the miscellaneous park improvements, we have an allotment for, where is that? $750,000 for miscellaneous park improvements. I was just curious about is that like the two parks that we will be doing, or what's that miscellaneous
Where
Park
are you,
improvements.
Mayor?
I don't know,
sorry.
I didn't write down the page number. It's
Okay,
like a-
no worries. It's probably probably in the Capitol.
I'm trying to find, yeah,
Okay.
I believe so.
Yes.
Capital
So that is something that our staff is working with the Parks Board to then ultimately recommend things your way. But that, let me make sure I got this here. What number? Page 7. Here we go.
Which page is that?
I'm on page 7 under section 6. I think Mr. West is what I think is where we're at.
Yes, it's the Capital Improvements Fund,
Yes. Yeah.
page 7. Under general, the first box, miscellaneous park improvements.
So what that is a continuation of our park improvements and investing in our parks. I know right now, the park board is looking at, I know Douglas Park and a design to tear out and replace in totality the splash pad and some related things, as well as repave that parking lot. There are some other parks that they're also identifying and deciding what to recommend to you ultimately. But those discussions, we're trying to get those discussions going as robustly as possible, even before the end of the year, so that we can bid out in the first quarter and try to get ahead on pricing, but also people's schedules. So that's just, what that is that's just a continuation of a placeholder in the budget for the park board to recommend improvements that fit that budget number. I can tell you, other than Douglas, there's going to be some others, but just don't know the specificity of those right now.
Okay, wonderful. And just to kind of go off with what Mr. West had brought up earlier about the possibility of looking at the parks, taking on new staff. So it looks like we have 3 coming on in this budget, correct? And he had mentioned maybe just 1. I thought maybe we could have a conversation around that as well. Because I know that what you had said in the past was that you wanted to maintain the parks if we're going to be able to, if we're going to do all this work. So could we have a conversation about the number of staff and what we need?
Yeah, and I think, and it goes, I think, to what Mr. Lawley opened with here. If council is desirous of forecasting a little bit rosier revenue projection, that is your assessment of things. There's as much art as there is science to getting it right, and seldom do we ever get it right. But the thought behind that is that previous council, this council continues to do so, has blessed the expenditure of some serious dollars in our parks, which are greatly needed. And we're replacing hardware, we're replacing the facilities over time, and the thought was that it would be a shame to make those types of capital investments and then we still are at our current level of maintenance capability, because we only have so much bandwidth. So if we're going to have something nice, let's keep it nice, is the thought. And so in looking at where we think we are on a glide path for expenditures, where conservatively were our revenues, that's what brought that proposal to you, is that's going to allow us to keep up on mowing, but also the preventative stuff, the trimming of the trees, the cutting back of your honeysuckle lines, cleaning the equipment, keeping those areas free of debris, keeping up on trash, keeping up on all the other nice to-dos. Frankly, here at City Hall, on this campus, some of our other campuses, the level of maintenance has just been not where it should be. And this will allow us to step it up, and try to be an example for property maintenance and upkeep and the like. So that's the thought behind it.
But the mowing's contracted out, isn't it?
Some of the mowing in the city is, not all of it. Right now, we contract out mowing for like the medians and boulevards. Some of the parks are contracted, but our staff then does the remainder.
I have a concern with Douglas Park. It's been that splash pad has been inactive for 4 years. I'd like to see a pool on that end of the city, mainly because they have no activities down there. And I can't see children on that end, Amanda, all in that area, going out to the atrium. The atrium's fine. But I spoke with some people in the neighborhood yesterday who talked about a pool, and they're willing to help maintain the pool. But I think you're getting ready to dig in the ground and fix the pipes, 4-year-old pipes, to put in a splash pad. Children need to learn how to swim, and you can't swim in a splash pad.
No, it's a little tough.
I'd like to see a pool down there. If we're gonna put money down there, if we're gonna put all this money into the parks, and we're gonna have other people maintaining the parks, why not put a pool down there in the area? We got a lot of empty spaces around here. And our children need to learn how to swim. It's a high risk. And this is something that they can do, they can learn, and they can manage their lives. But if we're gonna put money into the parks, let's put a pool somewhere that's accessible for our children on that end, and they can walk and they can ride their bikes. Moms won't have to worry about them getting on the bus and get on the bus and the bus driver have a bad day. No, we need to do something. If we're gonna work with parks, let's make it work.
That's a conversation we could have, but as far as fiscal year 25, that's probably not going to be doable for fiscal year 25.
The splash pad won't be either.
But it's in the plan, correct?
And ultimately, that's a discussion ultimately and a conclusion council can reach. You know, if and when a proposal is presented by the park board to you folks, and you folks can weigh in on before we bid it out. But that's where we've been going for right now. It's well within your folks' prerogative to change course a little bit and modify and tell folks to go sharpen the pencil and come back. So,
Right now, do we have money for the splash pads in the budget
yes, ma'am.
for next year, for 2025, fiscal year
Yes, ma'am.
2025?
Yes.
How much?
We're budgeting close to about $700,000, I believe.
For a splash pad?
There's other improvements related to it, so there'll be new equipment, playground equipment around the area. We're repaving the parking lot, trying to see what all needs to be done on that old concession building that Verlena's operation uses as well. We're trying to bring everything up to.
Could we add a pool to the community center?
We always can. There is obviously the capital expenditure of a pool or swim center or whatever. There's then also the ongoing operational costs that, you know, we would have to consider, and capital replacement as well over time. And that's a substantive budget conversation to have, and definitely can be explored.
Right, we could explore that. I just don't know if we have the means to do it for next year, right? So I think the splash pad, while we have that conversation, might be a good option, but we could certainly have that conversation.
Can't swim in a splash pad.
No, ma'am.
Learn how to swim in a splash pad.
Would you prefer, just curious, because if we have it in the budget now for the splash pad, would you prefer not to have the splash pad and save that money for a potential pool, or could we look at doing the splash pad so at least there's that?
I'll say this right now, though, the money that we have earmarked for a splash pad is pennies on the dollar compared to a pool.
Yeah.
So the renderings that we're starting to see on Park Board, now this is just a guess, I mean, they range all over, but I think you could put in, you know, a top tier splash pad for around $500,000, 600,000. Municipal pools, you're $4 to $6 million just to get them up and running, and then your annual operational costs would probably be the cost of a splash pad every year. So that's kind of the delicate balance of looking at when you have a municipal pool. But then, and if you kind of go back to the research we were doing for the aquatic center, you know, if you add, let's say, one of those slides just to get refurbished in 10 years is 6 figures. So if we were to explore that option, it's going to shop for a Honda Civic and coming out with a brand new Escalade. That's kind of that would be the scenario you'd have to cut a lot of other things, even just from an operational standpoint, year to year in the budget. They're money pits. That's why, if you recall, the option with the Y was the safest route to go, because we wouldn't incur the reoccurring cost or the capital investment to do the long-term replace, refurbish type, activities. But it's something, I mean, there are some cities around us doing it. So we could look at data from Franklin, for example, to see, but that's a monumental cost. It would almost be within a couple of years, you'd be at the cost of what we purchased Town Mall for, just to put it in perspective.
Well, I'm thinking of the children in the community, and I'm thinking of the moms with 6 children can't afford to pay a fee for them to get into the Y.
Well, there would be a fee with a municipal pool anyway, though.
Yeah, there's always a fee, though.
Yeah.
Yes, but, we won't have to have the challenges.
I completely understand. I completely understand where you're coming from, but what I'm saying is the cost is a much different conversation, and that's something we would have to plan ahead for a while.
I don't think it's possible,
You know what I mean?
yeah, for fiscal year 2025,
Yeah.
which is what we're talking about tonight. Although we could, having that conversation, absolutely, and when could that work for Middletown? How would that be possible if it did? Like, that's certainly a conversation. But I don't know if it's for next year. And that's why I was thinking, well, the splash pad is a good option until we can possibly have that conversation.
I'd be willing to visit that conversation for a pool, like you're saying, in 2025. I just don't think we have the budget necessary for 2025. But I would be willing to discuss it
Yeah.
in 2025.
That
I think it would be a conversation that we'd preface with having, you'd have to have some corporate intervention with corporate sponsorships and things like that to help subsidize operational costs. Chemical costs right now for pool chemicals has gone up. I don't even know what the multiple is, but just, for example, to close a pool used to be about $150 to $200. Now it's about $600 for the average homeowner, and a lot of that is the chemical costs. So, if we were to go that route, I would only be comfortable if we had significant subsidies from corporate donors, things like that.
And that's definitely a conversation we can have. For fiscal year 25, I think a good compromise is the splash pad. Any other thoughts on that, Mrs. Carter?
No, we can move on.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Anyone else? No, on that one? Okay.
I don't know.
Thank you. Just looking at some more of my questions here. If anybody else has any, please go ahead. Certainly.
Yes, sir.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. Is your microphone on? I'm not sure. Thank you.
There we go.
Thank you.
Let's try that again. So I'll use myself as an example. I'm paying $200 more a month to live in the same city, in the same county, the same house. I'm sure they'll get greater services with that 38% increase of the property tax. Now, we gave a holiday Does that mean that 6% is not being taken out for property taxes for city folks for now, or?
Yeah, essentially the second half of the year's collections that are attributable to our inside millage
Okay.
were not collected.
Okay, so if we do not continue the holiday, that is, just from little old me, that's $1,400 for one house in Middletown. I'm sure we got more than one house in Middletown. So is that, if we don't continue the holiday, is that number in? I
Yes.
guess it's going to be in the 25 or 26.
Yeah, it would be in the 25 budget. This 25 budget revenue projection anticipates the expiration of that waiver.
So that's more funding coming in for, and that goes into the general fund?
Yeah, for the inside millage does, yes.
Okay. I just need to know some things sometimes because I get to
I
pay
think
this
our
extra.
take on that was like $7. The average was like $7 and something a month, correct?
Yeah, it was.
Yep, but it's still funds,
Oh, yeah.
you know, because I also got my roof changed out, so I get to pay $250 extra a month.
I'll play.
My insurance went up too. Yay! Welcome to Middletown. So I just want to know that we're still doing that holiday. Now, when do we need to revisit that holiday?
There is no need for that. That was just for this previous tax year or collected this year.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
But eventually, now, hopefully, the powers that be up in Columbus stop that from a 38%. They're trying to just get it to where in the future it'll only be up maybe 4 or 5%. Because I don't think they understand that really hurts a lot of people when you don't plan to pay that extra, those funding. But I just want to know when that eventually would come into play.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had a question on general fund, page 21. Just about vehicle allowance. This is for the city manager's office. I'll wait for you to get there. Page 21, general fund. Okay, so with the vehicle allowance, we went from 5,400, 2023, 5,400, 24. Curious, what changed in 25 for 16,200? Just curious.
For the 24 budget, there was only a vehicle allowance budgeted, I believe, for the city manager's position. In the 24 budget, the 25 budget includes it for those 3 positions per the PBO. That's how I'm doing my math here, I think. Yeah.
So that's for one city manager, 2
Yes.
acting city managers.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct. 3 of them. Because it was a matter, the reason why we did that, it was a matter of what cities do is you either take a vehicle home or you do a vehicle allowance. And the preference here was do a vehicle allowance.
Thank you.
You didn't want to take that old Crown Vic home?
Yeah.
I'm good with it. I'll drive that rear-wheel drive.
As long as it has the lights and sirens?
That's right. As long as we have roadside assistance, I'm down.
Quick question on, and I think we may have already covered this, the additional dispatch FTE.
Yes.
That was to help alleviate from pulling an officer
Yeah.
to kind of
Yeah.
fill in. Okay.
Yeah, because depending upon schedule and when other people are off or whatnot, we've been having to fill in overtime either with an officer that could be on the streets, or we've also pulled some fire personnel from time to time, so.
Yeah.
Did we use an officers to dispatch or were we just using fire?
It has ebbed and flowed. I believe we have had some officers. Yeah, it's been a combo.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then for, you brought up QRT earlier for some of the investments made, or I should say equipment replacement. I don't really call it upgrade, but do we have enough budgeted for that? Because I know like the side-by-side's pretty old.
Yeah, I mean, we've budgeted for the side-by-side and some other things as well.
Okay.
So we feel good about that number.
Okay.
Chief and Sam and I have gone over that. We feel good.
On page 27 of the general fund, under city manager, I believe still, yeah, with recreation. You're there?
Yes, ma'am.
Page
Okay.
27?
Page 27, And so we're looking at the community projects coordinator that was moved to a new recreation, but not new. correct?
Yeah, what we did is we took, what you see here is essentially 2 Lego blocks in the 24 budget that were just moved kind of to the same placeholder in the budget. The personnel cost portion of this sheet was embedded in the city manager's office budget. And then everything that's non-personnel was in the 10911 series of expenses. We've just proposed to put it all in one area within the general fund for tracking purposes and transparency purposes, so we know what those endeavors are costing annually.
And the discussion was it was an attempt to start to move towards having a recreation department in Middletown.
Which I am very excited about, the baby steps there.
Yep.
So I just had some questions about this. I see we have $208,000 for the total expenditures for the budget, and $77,000 for recreational activities, I believe, yep. And then other supplies are 1,000. Could you break down what the 77,000 covers and then what the other supplies are for the 1,000?
So the 77,000 will cover things like, like we had Fall Fest this last weekend, and we had a circus group that obviously doesn't just come for free. You have to pay them to come. Some of the concerts in the park, we do pay for some of the talent. There's rentals of certain things, whether that be a bounce house or something like that. So that all ties into just this catch-all recreational activities line item. It just covers mostly our either talent acquisition costs or some of our hard costs for, bringing in.
And Nathan, correct me if I'm wrong there. That 77,000 is pulled from other budgets. Like, didn't we have some stuff that we pulled out of the city manager and then the non-departmental to do some of those activities?
Yes, yeah,
And then,
yeah.
So I don't think that 77,000 there is new.
No, this is not new money.
Pulled from other.
No, you're correct. We took bits and pieces that were embedded in the previous budget and just put them all in one place.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
And can you tell me what other supplies are covered in the 1,000? Like what that means?
That might be things like, we got to run out and buy another, we got to go to Ace Hardware and buy, 20 more no parking signs or event parking over here, or whatever, we have to change the time of something, we, buy a.
Is that community project coordinator at a 179 now?
Yes.
Okay, so that doesn't change.
No, it does not. No.
And I want to say that I do think that investing in community events is a wise investment. Just speaking to prevention, like we were talking about with health and safety and crime even, that when people feel connected, when there are fun activities that lead to more connection, that's all part of the plan. So I think it's very important to invest in this. Thank you. Also on, let's see, back in general fund, page 21. Myself. Okay, just curious at the travel and training increase. Travel and training. So it went from 4,613 in 23 to 10,000 in 24 to $25,000 for 25. Can you speak to that, please?
Yes. Right now, I think actually that budget line item might be going a little bit over in terms of actual expenses for this year. That was with 3 folks, at least through, 8 months, 9 months here on the budget. Up that too, because you just never know, what next year may lead in terms of contract provisions with the city manager's position or something. Sometimes there's provisions there that they, are allowed to go to
Big thing, you went from
conferences or
2 to 3. We went from 2 to 3.
But that's really the biggest driver.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's good. I like seeing money put into training.
yeah.
I think that's important to kind of try to, as we grow and as we can kind of make those baby steps forward to including more money for training in all of our departments really would be excellent. Thank you.
Nathan, on that line, in the budgets, there used to be a budget sheet that at the bottom had red it was in red, that explained a lot of these expenses. Did we go away from that?
We have, in the new software package, we have something very similar. We'll have a breakdown in the budget notes section of a particular line item that might have a breakdown of how we got
Is it at the bottom or is it like off to the side?
off to the side.
Because I don't know if you have a lot of room to
Yeah.
explain a lot of that stuff. And
Yeah.
that would help council with a tremendous, I mean,
I
like,
agree.
for example, when I said, what was the $100,000 increase in the equipment? In the past, we always had it explained on the one sheet down at the bottom what those costs were.
Yeah.
And that answered a lot of the questions we're having.
Absolutely, and Mr. Cahill and I have been talking about that, like, what's that called? Can we get that? Because it would answer so many of my questions. What's the
Yeah.
breakdown
And I-
even
and I-
further?
And I think we were so laser focused on trying to produce a budget book that's kind of what's disseminated to not only you folks at the end of the day, but the general public. I think we probably missed in the transition here for the new software package, probably bringing you up to speed on some of that secondary information as to how do we get to $50,000 in this line item. Now, sometimes, I'll be honest with you, sometimes it's just, this is kind of what we usually spend, and it's a whole host of things.
Oh, yeah, a lot of times, I mean, it said
Exactly.
miscellaneous supplies.
Oh, yeah, exactly. But, there's other times where it's very, like with the opioid, with the opioid fund, those supplies and materials, we have a list of everything, including the side-by-side that we were looking at to get to that $200-some thousand in equipment.
Right, and that's
That
the
would be
perfect
helpful.
thing,
You're right.
because it would be listed in there, and
Yep,
Steve, you would have seen in there that, yeah, that's gonna buy a new
Yeah.
side-by-side. Yeah. Or even in the opioid, we'd be able to see
yeah.
where we're,
I would like that for council, for sure, to be able to see that level
We'll
of
see if we
detail.
can generate that in the new software. I think we probably should be able to. Everything else, previously, that was just old legacy Excel sheets, so let's see if we can play with it.
Thank you, because most of my questions are like that.
Yeah.
Can you explain this, please, and that, please? Even the miscellaneous, it's nice just to know what kinds of things go in there. And that does answer a lot of my questions, if you can
yes.
see that. I'm going to keep looking at my questions to see what else I might have. If anybody else wants to step in, please do. One of the things I'm looking at, and this could just be because I don't get it or I just don't understand it, the street levy and the public safety, they're both 0.25%, correct? And for some reason, I'm not seeing matching numbers for those revenues, but I'm not
Yeah.
sure if I'm looking at it correctly.
So the public safety levy predates, obviously, the implementation of the extra 0.25% income tax for the street paving. With also your, you may have different people who have filed on different tax years. You may have a situation where you may have a taxpayer that filed the year before, the street levy came into existence, but hasn't paid afterwards, or are delinquent on that year, but not a previous year. You also have a situation with your net operating loss carry forward. So you may have a corporate net profit payment or an estimated payment that 4.5 years later, someone may be restating and resubmitting their tax returns as a corporate entity and taking money off the table. So there's different refund amounts that get attributed to one or the other. So that's what accounts for the difference in revenue at present. Theoretically, once we get past the carry forward and a few other things, it should mirror up, hopefully.
When do you think that might be?
I don't know, probably a couple more years, probably,
Okay, thank you for explaining that.
if my math's right, yeah.
Let's see here, special revenue funds, page 7. Looking at that. Curious about, I'll find it here. Oh, could you speak to, are you there, page 7?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Little past halfway down, other professional services. going from 2023, 16,000, 2024 to 43,000, and then for 25, 83,000. Could you speak to that, please?
Yeah, that's predominantly driven by a need to hire outside process servers to perfect service of summonses for certain delinquent account holders.
That should pay for itself, correct? I mean,
It's
we hope.
theoretically, that's
I mean, that's essentially.
it
what
should.
Hamilton-
That and the additional income tax auditor position will allow us to more rapidly and quickly process and audit returns. So it, in theory, it should more than pay for itself.
Okay, thank you. And I'm thinking that, when do you think we might have that deeper dive into the information?
We're going to find out in the morning.
Okay, great. Thank
Say
you.
that might be a challenge for this budget.
Yeah.
it-
That,
might be
that's
tough.
probably a lot of work, correct, Sam? I mean,
Yeah,
That's what I was thinking. I wanted,
I
would
think
love
we
it.
need to see it for the future.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point.
I was wondering if there's like access we could have just so we could check it out and like see it ourselves, but if that's not possible, a lot of my questions are kind of like that, just can you explain this and that? So I can always ask those offline, just one-on-one, I guess.
It's your meeting.
But does anybody else have anything kind of like budget overall that you'd like to discuss while we're all here together?
Well, I want to circle back around to what I started off with and look at these. I think we really need to look at these additional staff position and the public safety. And, I'm going to, before I get into that, what Councilmember Carter was saying about a swimming pool. I do think we really need to have that serious conversation in 2025. And we need to determine, because to me, our most precious resource is our kids. And if we can do it and afford it, kind of to what Councilmember West was saying, we're going to have to get some corporate sponsors, but I think we have to talk about it. Sometimes, look, we spend money for the good of the public.
Yes.
Sometimes we have to spend money for the good of the public. And that might be something we give serious thought to in 2025.
I'd love to have that conversation and kind of maybe even make it like very vocal and let people know to say, hey, we are looking, what could the corporate sponsors do? Who's out there who would want to be part of this conversation? So certainly. So
circling back to what I was talking about earlier, and I get it. You guys have a tough job. I understand the conservative outlook, but if I look back through that historical data, I'm not so concerned if we don't up the projection. And you guys tell me if I'm wrong, but like I was saying, I honestly think we need to add at least 3 additional police officers to what we have in front of us, the 85, and go to, at the minimum, 87 for 2025, because it's going to take us till June to get them on the roads. And I think a combination of upping our conservative projections, plus some of these positions, I think we can hold off on. I know people in the building, need some help, but there's some positions here I think we could hold off on, because I think public safety is extremely important. We've got to be prepared for the growth of the East End. We have to be, and especially during the construction of it. Because what happens, and I'm sure Councilmember Horn can tell you, when you start these big construction sites, they have a lot of theft, and we need to have officers on the streets, additional officers on the streets. I'm pretty adamant about that, and to get to that 90, and that 90 is a conservative number. If we go by the national statistics of how many officers we should have, we should probably have, 110?
10.
And I'm going to tell you something, that's with 50,000 people. we're at 52,000 people, and with the housing we have going on, I'm not so sure we're not going to be over 55,000 people in the next few years.
I guess what I'm looking at is how can we get there sustainably while we're doing all the other things as well to ensure, plus looking at what the wages are going to be.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is the projections, being a little bit more precise on our projections. Plus, I see positions in here that I'm not so sure we need right now.
What projection would you like to, what do you think as far as the conservative number that we have right now? What would you like to see as a possibility?
I mean, what, 3 additional police officers would add $300,000 to the budget, correct? And I would assume that that would be sustainable.
400, 450?
What's that?
Probably closer to
3 officers, 450?
Well, once you figure in
We're
overtime
figuring
and
it at
health
100,000
insurance
an
and
officer
everything,
now.
health insurance and other things.
Right. An officer comes in and starts at what, 60,000?
No, comes in at
65?
70, right around 70, I believe.
Okay, 70.
Yeah,
Okay, plus what? Add about
25,000 for health
5%.
insurance,
24%, or is it
and
higher than that?
24. Actually, no.
So it's not much over 100,000.
You know, probably looking at another vehicle, but they share vehicles. But you know, all in told, to be safe, at least 4.
I agree, Paul.
And then, okay, so,
Okay, even if it's 400,000.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah.
So that would put, we're proposed, and this is just patrol officers. The amount that's proposed for patrol officers is at 54, so you're saying 57 for patrol.
Well, I would hope the police chief puts them out in patrol.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying,
I
yes.
don't like
I see what you're
I
saying.
don't like to get into micromanaging the city manager or the police chief or the fire chief. We need more officers on the street. So I think the police chief would hear us saying, we give you 5 more officers or 4 more officers or what have you, that the intention is they go on the streets.
Yeah.
Nathan, so when you move the fire department into their new buildings, is there funds in this budget to convert that one fire station on Cincinnati Dayton Road or Dixie Highway, whichever one you want to call it, into a remote police station?
Substation.
Substation?
Yeah.
People where policemen are and criminals don't want to be.
Yes.
That place.
Yes.
Probably not enough in this budget. And that was something that once we get all fully moved, get into all 4 stations, I thought that was going to be more of a 2026 budget discussion. Just because honestly, we have to, you know, in a vacuum, it sounds like a perfectly good idea. We got to assess that building to make sure we're going to meet certain standards and requirements. And the thing that I and the police division are ignorant on right now is to what extent there may be some remodeling need to that building. So that's the unknown, but we should have that answer for next year's, for 26's budget.
That's just a question because looking at the construction, the way it's going, I mean, honestly, the Renaissance, the civils should be done by the winter. So you're going to start the construction and everything else majorly in 2025. Town Mall, that reality is 27 with all the things that have to happen with lawyers and monies and everything else. So we have time, but we own the buildings, we own the properties, because even you and I had a discussion about even what 85 could be used for. So it's just a thought, because that is a perfect location, because it's right there near all the major intersections. You are less than 5 minutes away from the middle school, high school, so you could respond to an incident to the SROs there, and then you're on the east side immediately, and then to help the officers from the city to the middle part of the city, being the Braille area, that response would be there too, to have that remote there. So we have time, but it's nice that we own the buildings and we own the property. It's a shame the property kind of does, like you said, a 45-degree where we can't really expand toward the back of it. But I mean, it was a fire station and it can be utilized with offices and everything else. But yes, obviously there'd have to be some renovation to take a fire station and turn it into a a remote police station.
So you said that we probably don't have enough in the budget for 25
Yeah,
to do that.
I think we do, and I think,
Okay.
let me talk this through with you folks, because I think it's going to be, this is the assessment that you folks are entrusted to make on behalf of the community. The approach that staff was proposing was kind of a tiered spend down of the general fund balance of a tranche now, and then another tranche, a smaller tranche for the 26 budget, and then get to a level balanced budget environment, hopefully for 27. We can dip the nose of the aircraft a little bit steeper, and we'll be fine. What that will mean is there may be a little bit tighter of a 26 budget assessment for extras. So it may very well manifest itself, Mr. Lawley, of, hey, we're going to go up to 87 officers for the 25 budget, budgetarily, and for 26, maybe we only get to 2 or 1, but we'll hash that out. But I think we'll just have to tap the brakes a little bit more on expenditures compared to the 25 proposal. Just a little bit harder for 26, but within workable parameters. Because I think Mr. Lawley hits upon, something that's very accurate, is that revenues for income tax, we pretty much know what property tax is going to be, give or take a percentage point, it is what it is. But there are certain things that, if we knew with certain specificity, we'd probably, start a hedge fund or start shorting a stock or something if you really knew. We use some historical data. We have some atypical historical data in terms of corporate net profit filings that were unexpected, and which is a really good first world problem to have. Upwardly skewed our revenues, which has helped build this general fund balance. So I think that there isn't necessarily a need to cut any positions per se, as much as maybe just have an understanding that 26 there may not just be the ability for as much acceleration compared to 25, but it's workable. I think in constructing this budget proposal, we were looking at this almost in a lens of almost a 2-year type of budget. The first year was setting up the next, which is what we usually do anyway, but there's a little more hyper-focus to that. But there's a means by which to accomplish, I think, what all of you folks are talking about and still be just fine. I mean, really, in all honesty, the additional police staff that you just raised, that's about a 1% increase. That's basically, maybe $1.50. But, I would love to have egg on my face and come in and say, we modeled 3% and it came in at 4.5%, which may very well happen.
So, yeah, because if I look at the personal service expenditures you have in here in 2025, they've increased by $2.9 million, correct?
What page are you on, Paul? I'm sorry.
I'm not on any page right now. I just
Okay.
wrote it down from.
Okay.
It might be.
You talking general fund?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
So it might be page 76.
Yeah.
You go 32 million minus 29 million. Is that right? Yeah. So if it's 2.9 million, then about 1.4 of that is due to the 5% COLA. Is that right? Which I think's needed, at least 5%. And then
Yeah, the
the
COLA.
new employees we have in this budget at about 1.49 million, correct? The new positions?
Which positions are they?
So it'd be the deputy clerk of council, the city manager, administrative assistant. We're deleting, but we're adding an administrative assistant in law.
Yeah.
That's something I'm not really thrilled about. My point on that is we should let whoever the permanent city manager is make that decision if they want to delete the administrative assistant in the city manager's office. And then I thought in the law department we were bringing in a paralegal. I don't see the need for an administrative assistant in the law department if we're not bringing in a paralegal. There's a a clerk position in HR, they need that. The event center, we have to have the one manager plus the part-time. Then the police, fire, dispatcher, corrections officers too, building maintenance we have to have. So
We talked about a park. You were saying something about 3
then
parks.
there's 3 positions in the park.
Why do we need 3?
He had spoken to that, but you can reiterate again quickly.
Yeah, I mean, the thought behind it is to actually do a better job of maintenance and upkeep of our parks.
Of our parks?
Yeah.
I don't think 3 is gonna do that.
Oh, I know that, but there's obviously competing needs and interests, you know, so it's trying to incrementally, you know.
Baby steps.
It's this balancing act, you know. There are folks that will say, you know, we need 100 cops tomorrow. Okay,
How
perfectly
many
fine
do we
position.
have in the park now?
I'm trying to think here. In parks,
Park man at 6.
6, plus a supervisor, I believe, that floats. But yeah, actually we have
6.
Yeah. Well, no, actually we have.
My
we have 6
priority is public safety
Yeah.
and police.
Mine
I think
also,
we-
so I
we have to
wouldn't
get these
vote for
officers
Yeah.
on the street.
3 people to go to the
Yeah,
park.
and,
I wouldn't.
and where we're at, I think we can accommodate all of this, even with projections. It just, there may not be as much freeboard for the 26 budget as we stabilize expenses versus revenues going forward, but I think it's a workable issue.
So basically, we would just do the all at once instead of the 2-year.
Yeah, but I'm just gonna, reality sets in. That's what we hear every year when it comes to budget. I don't know if you guys have watched council meetings over the year, over the years, but that's always the preface. And I'm not saying this to bash you, Nathan,
no.
but we're gonna do all the hiring this year and then next year nothing. But every year there's additional staff that's asked for. So the way I look at this, and no offense to any staff that's here, and I'm going to put it into car terminology again because that's my thing. This is, when you see the draft budget, that's what the sales manager is coming back saying, this is our best price. Here's where I stand. I will not sit here and allow for the Parks Department to hire more than we are for police officers, FTE wise. We're not going to do it. Right. I'm just going to go down the list. Parks Department, okay, maybe 1. I'm fine with adding corrections officers. Another dispatcher, yes, because I think it's absolutely horrible to put, whether it be a firefighter or a police officer, pull them off their normal shift and say, hey, now you have to be put in this role. It's just not right. Obviously, event center, yeah, that's an investment that, you know, previous council made. We're here to support that. When it comes to the deputy clerk of council, I think maybe we could wait another year for that. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think, Amy, you're going to be around longer than a couple of years, maybe?
If I can speak to that,
Sure, yeah.
yeah, so, if that's the will of council, we'll make that work.
Well, no, give us, I mean, you can be honest with us.
Yeah, talk
I mean,
to
just
us.
say, just say like, I mean, you're going to be around a couple more years.
I am. I'm
Okay.
going to retire in 5 years.
So we could, okay, so 5 years, okay. So even if we wanted some lead time in for the deputy to get, that's something we could look at in the near future, right? So, but I guess what I'm saying is, and I totally, I love how finance came back with some of these conservative curves, because again, that we don't know what the emergencies may be next year, right? I mean, look at how much has happened this year. Look how much happened last year with the previous council. So you never know. You want to have a little bit of that additional funding that wasn't necessarily earmarked or accounted for. But I really want to take a hard look at increasing the public safety numbers, because I mean, we could be in a pretty bad crunch if in my opinion, if we don't add at least 2 or 3 more compared to what we have in front of us. And then, you know, we're probably on track with the fire department moving in. We could probably look at some assessments on, with the old fire station on Cincinnati Dayton Road, to where we would have the funding to even move out on that a little bit quicker, you know, say this time next year. So we wouldn't have to hold off to a 2026 budget, you know, discussion. So that's kind of where, that is my entire take on it. Is I don't ever want to look at a budget and say, well, this is all the hiring we're going to do for multiple years, because it's just not the case. If that were to be the case, then as a city, we're not really growing or doing much. You know what I'm saying? So that's my 2 cents. That's kind of where I stand. I'd be open to one additional for the parks, 3 more police officers. We kind of hold off on deputy clerk of council for another year. And I'm fine with the additional dispatch corrections officers, you know, 1 and 2 in those roles.
When you said, because what I heard was 2 to 3 more uniform patrol on top of what we see here, or do you mean 2 to 3 more total for this year?
No, 85 plus 2 or 3.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
a total this year of 4 new?
That would put us at,
The books,
88.
they say 85, so 3 more would put us at 88
88.
sworn officers.
Oh, okay, so you're talking about total 3.
Intent would be to
Okay,
put
thank you.
those
I
on
thought you
the
meant like
streets.
5 more. I was like, oh. Yeah, okay, so for this year, 2 to 3. We're budgeted already we were for 2, and now this new one says 3, correct? So that's where we are right now in the budget? That you're happy with where we are right now?
I think to
No,
address,
I'm
I
saying
think,
from what
yeah.
we have in front of us. I want more than what we have in front of us.
Okay,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. And,
You are talking 5.
and this will take me back to one of the previous meetings. I look at, you know, kind of all of our operational costs. We know, I'll go back to what I said before when I first raised a question to the initial draft, was we have to make sure that the staff that we have currently, that we have the ability to take care of them. It never gets cheaper, so we're always going to give a COLA. We're always going to offer, you know, they can earn the step increases, things like that. So I want to make sure that before we deficit spend too much, I hate to use that term, but before we deficit spend too much on reoccurring costs, that we make sure that we understand that the people that we have, we want to, if they choose to stay here their entire career, that there's a spot for them. Because that's, I mean, in my contracts, that's something that we always take a look at. I know in recent years, the COLAs have only been 2%, 3%. You know, there could be some promotions in there, but when I look at this, I want to make sure that if we're going to make some significant leaps on additional FTEs, I want to make sure that the primary focus, the highest tier when it comes to the number of FTEs that we're adding, is going to be within public safety. With the assets that are being added to the city, the last thing we want is to get a bad rap. You know, when we're trying to talk to developers, investors,
Yes.
you know, it's already tough enough as it is. So I want to make sure that, you know, we give all the tools necessary, you know, for the new chief to have the success that we all can see coming.
So Mayor, if you go to page 50, go to page 50 in the general fund budget, and you see in the department overview, just a paragraph or 2 down, on page 50, it said the 2025 budget contains the following personnel: 85 sworn officers positions. So we're saying we want to go to 88 with the intention. Now, that includes if you wear a badge in the police department, that's what that is. It's not secretaries or anything else. It's if you wear a badge, those 88 officers have arrest powers, I guess is another way to look at it. Now, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chief or Nathan, that gives us 1 additional officer for the streets, that 85, plus you'll get another one from the SRO, correct?
Yeah.
So that's 2. We're saying 3 more, because 2, I mean, there's 3 shifts, day turns, 3 to 11s, and midnights. 2 gets you 2 people on one of those turns 5 days a week.
So Chief Nelson, that would look like, right now we have about 6 per shift and one has 7, correct, officers? Is that correct? So this would put us closer to 7 and 8.
Yes, ma'am. Typically, we run 3 shifts. The day shift usually runs 6 cars a shift. 311 is a little bit busier, so we tend to put 7 cars a shift out, and then midnights is a little bit slower. Usually run 6 cars a shift. But
So when you say cars, does that mean patrol officers and supervisors?
yes, sir. So it's usually 6 police officers, 6 patrol officers and 1 supervisor per shift. So
Okay.
6, 7, 6 on midnights. But what we've seen over the last 5 years is that our calls for service for day turns and 311s, they're only about 3,000 calls off. So it's not a huge leap to go from, you know, the amount of calls you get on days versus 311s. It's no longer day shift is the easiest shift anymore. It's not. Midnights drops drastically, but we see that pick back up once those businesses out in the East End, as they tend to grow. So it's picking up.
Okay, so this would allow for about 1 more per shift.
Yes, ma'am. And then we're working. I have the lieutenant's working on a new beat plan where we're adding 2 more beats on the East End to see what that looks like. That will increase our staffing for each additional shift. So we're trying to get it to about 8 or 9 officers per shift.
Right.
Okay.
That would 1 first shift for 5 days. There's out of 7 days a week. But then, Sundays, you have your slower times that I'm sure like we did in the fire department. We knew we can't schedule emergencies, obviously, but what your normal busy times are.
All right, thank you very much, Chief. So again, just to be clear, we're looking at the 85 took us up from, that was going to be an addition of 3, correct, Mr. Cahal? 85?
That is correct.
So that was a 3, and then we're looking at 2 to 3 more, so to 87 or 88, correct? That would be a total of 5
Correct.
or 6. Okay.
That'll
So
make it easier for us to get to 90 by 2026, and then we're going to have to reevaluate where we need to go.
So why do we need 9 clerical staff? What,
So those account for our records clerks and the records division, as well as a few administrative support staff that handle, payroll, they handle purchasing and the bills, they handle coordination with the tow lot and the like, commissary stuff, all kinds of stuff.
And with what's being said, I guess staff will go back and look to see, can we, given what's coming in 2025 with salary increases, wage increases, if this is sustainable for fiscal year 2025 to add on a total of 5 or 6 more officers, and then we can have that information.
I'll just tell you right now, it is.
Okay,
It is. It's doable.
all right.
It's just the growth of spending for 26 will have to be slightly reduced, but it's manageable. I mean, it's just
Possibly, though. If things continue the way they've been.
oh, yeah, yes,
Okay,
yeah. I mean, that's,
Nathan, I have one
Once
question.
again, I think it's,
yeah, I don't see I don't see a need in reduction of staffing proposed at all.
Yeah.
It was just, you were presented with a slightly more conservative model than,
So you're requesting a paralegal. What is that? And I think you explained that before, but I forgot. What is that paralegal for? And the reason I'm asking that is we have the law director, and that he has a group, and he has attorneys, associates, paralegals, and legal secretaries. Why do you need one on staff versus we just pay him more money?
it's cheaper to have it on staff.
Okay. With health benefits and retirement?
and
Yeah.
the paralegal in there now needs help.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to know why. You know.
And the issue we're running into is and I know Bricker Partners may not want to hear this, they're dealing with a lot more just kind of day-to-day stuff that should stay here, but it's just a bandwidth issue that they're getting involved in, so
We've
it'll
seen
hopefully
that.
reduce some of our legal costs as well.
yeah, we've seen that with some of our boards and commissions
Yeah.
and things like that during the meetings. Okay, and then also just to be clear, this would take us, looking at 5 or 6 additional officers this year, that with the pay and wage increases coming in 2025, that would probably take it'd be like a one step down to about, where do you think that would put us, like about 35%, 36%?
I think we're going to hover in the, I mean, a little north of that.
A little bit north of
I think,
that?
yeah.
That's still okay then.
Yeah, I think the issue we have is that, just keep in mind that, and when you're comparing, so in this budget and in previous budget documents, if you've been trying to reference trends or whatnot, we compare budget to budget as originally passed. Keep in mind that we've had years since I've been here where council has made upwards of $7, $8, $9 million of supplemental appropriations out of the general fund throughout the year for opportunities or unexpected things. There is in this budget, like there is every budget, there is a little bit of contingency built in certain areas. And those are things that we don't like to, we try not to dip into. And those are the conversations the finance director and I are having starting this time of year as to, is there any need to expense adjust anything there? So I think you're protected. You know, you folks are the final arbiters of risk assessment when it comes to the public treasury. And so I'm telling you tonight that what's been thrown out here tonight is a workable option, and is something that can be modeled around without any issue, unless, you know, we have some sort of black swan event, God forbid, you know, between now and then.
That sounds great. Is everybody pleased with that budget discussion that we've had tonight? Anything else that anybody would like to mention this evening? From council, from Nathan, Mr. Cahall? No? All right. Well then, I think if we're done with that conversation, we are going to be moving to executive session. So do I hear a motion to move to executive session under the authority of ORC 121.22G to consider the appointment of a public official?
Motion.
Do we have a second?
Second?
It has been properly moved and seconded to move to executive session. We will proceed to vote. Mrs. Gang, please call the roll.
Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Horn?
Yes.
Mayor Slamka?
Yes.
Mrs. Carter?
Yes.
Mr. Lawley?
Yes.
The yeses have it, and the motion passes. Council will now move to executive session. Do I hear a motion to move to executive or I'm so sorry, do I have a motion to return to open session?
Motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
It has been properly moved and seconded to return to open session. We will proceed to vote. Mrs. Skank, please call the roll.
Yes.
Mayor Slanka?
Yes.
Mr. Lawley?
Yes.
Mrs. Carter?
Yes.
Mr. West?
Yes.
Wonderful, the yeses have it. We now return to open session. Do we have a motion to appoint Mr. Paul Lawley as the Butler County Land Bank Liaison from Middletown?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been properly moved and seconded. We will proceed to vote. Mrs. Skank, please call the roll.
Mayor Slanka?
Yes.
Mr. Lawley?
Abstain.
Mrs. Carter?
Yes.
Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Horn?
Yes.
The yeses have it, and the motion passes. Congratulations, Mr. Lawley. That concludes our special meeting of City Council for Monday, October 28th, 2024. At 7:49 p.m., this meeting is adjourned until Tuesday, November 5th, 2024 at 5:30 p.m. in these chambers for our next regular council meeting. Thank you.